In this video, I'm going to talk a little bit about what I write about in my book, Misguided Love, Christians and the Rupture of LGBTQI2+ people, around what shaped Christian attitudes, particularly negative Christian attitudes that have become harmful and that has been harmful in history. What shaped that over time in Christian thinking? And the first thing I want to talk about is this word Sodom and the so-called sin of sodomy. First of all, it's really important to recognize that this story of the sin of Sodom and this being associated with same-sex relationships is a myth. It's not based in the biblical text at all. And it's a myth that was created around the same time that Jesus lived by a Jewish scholar called Philo of Alexandria, who was a legal scholar and taught Jewish ideas and Jewish law in the city of Alexandria. Philo of Alexandria had a very specific agenda. He wanted to make the Judaism of his time acceptable in the Stoic culture of higher Greco-Roman culture. So he wanted to explain how Judaism is a good religion in terms of what Greco-Roman Stoics thought was a good thing. And so his rejection of same-sex relationships was based in the Stoic philosophy of the time, which actually rejected all forms of sexual relationships as a form of, for a man to lose his objectivity and his rationality as a human being. Sexual intercourse with another person, whether it be a woman or a man, was considered a kind of weakness. And where the Stoics thought of this as a weakness that people might indulge in now and then, and that's okay, Philo went a step further, and he was very, very negative towards same-sex relationships in particular. This was shaped also historically by his experience in the city of Alexandria and what he observed there. And this myth of the story of Sodom, which he then associated with same-sex relationships, became very influential in early Christianity. And from that, we get by the 3rd and 4th centuries in Christianity, the story of sodomy and the sin of sodomy, which goes throughout history in a thread that becomes violent by the 13th century, where violence and torture is exercised against sexual and gender minority people based on this particular myth. This is one of the problems that we find in Christian history. There's much more in my book about how that story echoed through Christian history in very nasty and very harmful, violent ways. Shocking stories about torture, about abuse, about people being starved to death, people being held underwater until they drowned, people hung upside down, people's genitals being cut off and then they're hung upside down until they bleed to death. And even in Protestant Geneva, people tied to a big wheel and beaten with clubs until all their bones are broken and their body expires. These are awful practices in Christian tradition that I discuss and describe in my book so that we can understand truly how deep this negative and nasty attitude towards sexual and gender minorities in Christianity developed.